Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, dear listeners, welcome back to the podcast and thank you for tuning in to episode 99. Crazy and exciting to think that next week I'm going to be releasing episode 100, which is a very special interview. But that's enough of a spoiler for now. Focusing on the topic of today's episode, I was reflecting on those clients of mine that have been most successful in their own fitness journey with me. And I've identified 13 key traits and skills that they developed that helped them achieve that level of success. So I want to talk you through these today. Importantly, I don't believe you need to have all of these traits and skills to begin with, but you need to be willing to work towards them. Also, to clarify, I didn't put these traits in any particular order. I wrote them down as inspiration took me. As always, I believe that mindset is the foundation to success. So the first trait has to do with your mindset, and it is to have a get to as opposed to a have to attitude, which means that you are aware that you get to diet, you get to train, you get to look after and respect your body by changing your lifestyle, your way of eating, and your way of moving. It's your choice and no one is forcing you. If you develop this attitude, then you're going to think of fitness and your approach to it as a way of creating a positive change, as opposed to trying to hate yourself into change by engaging in behaviors that you see as chores. If you consider training and eating a certain way a chore, I don't believe you're going to be as successful as if you thought of these behaviors as choices that you get to and are excited to make. The second trait is that you need to be willing to put in the work that's required to achieve your goal. A saying that I really like is, don't complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. To be successful with this, you need to be clear about your priorities at all times. For instance, if your priority is fat loss, realistically, you're not going to be able to go YOLO every weekend. You might tell yourself, well, if I'm consistent Monday to Friday, then I can let my hair down a little bit over the weekend. If letting your hair down is taken to an extreme, you can easily offset the 5 days you were in a deficit with these 2 days over the weekend to a point where you may not be losing any weight, or you may even be putting it back on. You can certainly be social during a fat loss phase, but if the priority is fat loss, then you need to put in the work of setting boundaries with yourself and other people to avoid going YOLO so that you can stay consistent with a deficit as long as it's required for you to complete your fat loss phase. Trait number 3 is to adopt a flexible mindset as opposed to a perfectionistic black or white mindset when it comes to putting in the work. For instance, with regards to food, there are no good or bad foods. There are foods that serve you at this moment in time, depending on your goal, and foods that don't serve you quite as well. For instance, if your goal is to be in a surplus, having too many fruit and vegetables and too many foods that are high in volume and low in energy density could make you feel very full even though you haven't eaten enough calories to achieve your surplus. So while these foods tend to be very health promoting, and you can certainly have enough of them to cover your nutritional basis, you don't want to overdo them to the point where now they're getting in the way of your achievement of a calorie surplus. With regards to your actions in general, having a flexible mindset as opposed to a perfectionistic black or white mindset means that you can pivot. So if your plan A goes to shit, you don't press the proverbial fuck it button because you've already ruined it in your mind. Instead, you're going to do the best that you can under the circumstances, and you're going to carry on the next day with the exact same behaviors instead of thinking, you know what, I'm just going to start over next week because this week I've ruined this one day. If you adopt a perfectionistic black or white mindset, you're brittle. As soon as something goes wrong, you break and you eat your weight in cake or you skip all of your workouts for the rest of the week. So instead of having one day that goes a little bit pear-shaped, now you drop an entire week down the drain. The fourth trait, which builds upon the flexible mindset and the willingness to put in the work, is that you're willing to face your mistakes and to find solutions to them for the future. You're not avoiding them, sweeping them under the rug, or running away from them. When you make a mistake, you don't press the reset button and forget about it completely, because if it happens again, you still haven't found a solution to it. For example, if you eat a burger and you think, that's a bad food, now my day isn't perfect, it's not a good health promoting day, so I'm not going to track anything on MyFitnessPal, you are avoiding the problem, which is not having eaten the burger, but the fact that you have a very dichotomous way of thinking about food, whereby some foods are good and some foods are bad. So every time that you have a bad food, all of a sudden you don't track for the entire day. So as a result, you don't pay as much attention to what you're eating, and now you're holding yourself back from achieving your fitness goals. Another example of running away from aspects of your fitness journey that you don't like is that if you miss a workout, you feel so ashamed that now you avoid the gym all week because you cannot face that you had to miss one workout. With regards to this trait, I'm going to tell you a story about my client Elijah, who's doing a great job of facing those mistakes and thoughts that he doesn't like facing. He has always been very honest with me, and he's told me that when something that he doesn't like happens, or when he does something that he doesn't like, he tends to forget about it. So we've started working on his body image, and he really doesn't like some of his body image thoughts. So I've asked him to keep a body image diary where he can write down these thoughts, and then we're working on developing some helpful counter thoughts to the initial negative thoughts. And when we first started using the body image diary, Elijah would write down his original negative body image thoughts and then leave it there without adding any counter thought until I brought up this fact and told him, look, if you don't develop the counter thoughts, you're not going to be able to overcome your negative body image. And since then, he's been a lot more proactive when it comes to coming up with counter thoughts to point out the inconsistencies in his negative body image thoughts and how they aren't rational thoughts that he truly believes in. And as a result, he's slowly undoing and overcoming all of these negativity that he has developed surrounding his own body, which wouldn't have been possible if he'd simply continued to sweep these thoughts under the rug. So first off, shout out to Eli, because that work is freaking hard. And second of all, this was just to put a bow or to tie a bow on the importance of being willing to face what you don't like about yourself and what you perceive to be a mistake. Trait number 5 is to be able to take a compassionate approach. which doesn't mean that you cut yourself slack all the time. Anytime you fall short of a target, you tell yourself, that's okay, I'm human, I'll do better next time. And so you end up never achieving anything. True compassion means that you give yourself grace, where you acknowledge that you fell short of your target, like all humans do, and that's okay, because guess what? You're human too. But then, the second part of taking a compassionate approach is that you ask yourself, how can I do better next time? You don't beat yourself up, but also you don't just move on. You reflect on what happened so that you can develop a strategy to potentially overcome a similar obstacle in the future. That's the only way that you're going to grow and that you're going to be able to achieve the goal that you fell short of this time. Trait number 6 is that you don't give power to external circumstances or to other people when your decisions are within your control. Giving power to someone else or something else would be saying, oh, well, I had to eat that dessert because my mom made it and I didn't want to disappoint her. I understand that you don't want to disappoint your mom, but you can still make the choice to have a smaller slice of cake or to set a boundary with her and explain, Mom, I love your cooking and I am definitely going to enjoy your cake in the future, but right now I'm focusing on my health and I need to lose a little bit of fat as part of that health focus, which means that I need to be a little bit more careful temporarily around the food that I eat. So today I'm not going to have your cake. Sometimes, however, there are circumstances that are outside of your control, in which case it's really important that you don't beat yourself up for something that you don't have control over. You don't let this discourage you, and you focus on what it is that you can control. For example, let's say that you made the perfect plan to be able to get all of your workouts in this week. Then you rock up to the gym on Sunday night and you forgot that it closes early and it's already shut. Well, what's the next best thing that you can do short of going to the gym? Maybe you go home and you get in a home workout and you call it a day. And you still moved your body. It may not be the workout that was written on your program, but you still did do a training session. And then you can start a new week and aim not to train on a Sunday at 8 p.m. this time. And that's all. You're making the most of a not so ideal situation. And that's all you can do when you're faced with circumstances outside of your control. Trait number 7 is that you plan ahead of time. And this includes planning your meals, whether you track your calories or not, planning your workouts, planning your steps. If you have a target to achieve, you need to make a plan in order to get there. Otherwise, whether you achieve the goal or not is down to luck. It's not intentional. I use the word intentional with my clients all of the time. You need to be intentional with the fitness behaviors that are required to achieve your goals. Otherwise, your success is up to chance. In addition to that, having a plan limits your decision fatigue, because if you set aside some time to think about your plan and to focus solely on it, you're going to have plenty of mental energy to channel into this endeavor. On the other hand, if you don't have a plan, and you're winging it, you're trying to make a decision when you're also distracted by a lot of other thoughts, a lot of other things to do. Like, for instance, if you try to make a health promoting decision when you're sitting down at the restaurant table and looking at the menu, surrounded by your friends, trying to make conversation at the same time, it's going to be a lot harder and it's going to be very tempting to opt for the highly palatable, easy meal that you know you like just because you want to get the decision over with. If you have a plan, in the moment when your attention is pulled in a gazillion different directions, all you need to do is follow the plan. There is no decision to be made. You save energy to focus on what really matters at that time, and you also make a decision that's aligned with your goals. Trait number 8, which is closely related to number 7, is to have a plan B. It doesn't need to be as detailed and elaborate as plan A, because ideally you're not going to have to use it. However, it's always good to have a contingency plan should anything happen. For instance, when I'm helping a client become consistent with hitting the gym regularly, I will suggest that they plan their plan A workouts as early as possible in the week. Let's say that they have an upper lower split and they train 4 days a week. I would suggest that they train Monday through to Thursday so that they have Friday to Sunday to make up for any sessions that they might have to miss. If it's the kind of program where it's actually ideal to do 2 days of training, 1 day's rest, and 2 more days of training, then I recommend that they try to train Monday to Friday, commitments permitting, so that they still have the weekend to make up on any session they may have to skip. And you can apply this same approach to any other fitness target that you might have, whereby, for instance, if you have a certain number of steps to hit on a daily basis, but realistically you know that on one day you might not get as many steps in, then as early as possible in the week, you'd have a high step day so that you can be a little bit more relaxed because you're going to be able to meet the average for the week overall, since you did do at least one higher step day. The remaining 5 traits are specifically related to nutrition. And trait number 9 is to have a solid meal structure in place and an understanding of the appropriate portions for you, not only in terms of calories and macros, but also and importantly, in terms of what that food actually looks like on a plate. If you've been tracking your calories for weeks or months or even years, and you still don't know what your recipe that you've been logging into MyFitnessPal all this time actually looks like on a plate, and you couldn't put it together without weighing everything and without putting it into MyFitnessPal, then you've been using calorie tracking as a crutch. And if you take that away, you're not able to follow a health promoting diet, which is a problem. Because once you take away tracking, then you're no longer able to hit your fitness goals. This applies even if you're not tracking calories and if you're following a meal plan, for example. If you don't understand the principles that meal plan is built upon, when you don't want to use it anymore, what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to, because you haven't actually built any habits or you've not developed any knowledge of nutrition. You've only developed the ability to copy a meal plan word for word. And if you have a solid meal structure in place where you're eating roughly the same number of meals and snacks every day, around the same time, and the structure for the meal and snacks themselves is always the same. For example, for snacks, you have a source of protein and a fruit or a veg. And for your meals, you have a quarter of your plate for your carbs, a quarter of your plate for your protein, and half the plate for fruit and veg. It doesn't matter what the ingredients are, the structure is always similar. Then it's a lot easier to manage your nutrition and to hit your nutrition goals, as opposed to having meals that look entirely different every single day. Trait number 10 is to keep your food variety under control. While a diverse diet is really important for health, and especially gut health, you don't need to have 3 different meals and 2 different snacks every single day. That is going to do your head in. It's going to make you lose motivation to plan your meals. It's going to make it harder to have a solid meal structure in place. And it's going to make it more challenging to make health promoting decisions, just because you're always thinking of all these possibilities for meals and snacks, which realistically you don't need. Instead, what you can do is to have some staple recipes, and every now and again, when you get tired of one, you replace it with something entirely new, or you can keep the same recipe but you change some of the ingredients. For example, to have more variety, you could have different fruit and vegetables one week, whereas the following week you could change up your protein sources. The week after that, you might change up your carb sources, but you're not always overhauling your entire menu just for the sake of it. This is especially important in a fat loss phase when you're in a calorie deficit, which is the smallest calorie budget you're ever going to have. And when your calorie budget is small, it's harder to be accurate with your tracking of the food that you're eating, and therefore with your ability to make progress with fat loss if your food continues to change, unless you're willing to put a lot of work and mental energy into ensuring that your accuracy and consistency of nutrition management and tracking is always top notch. Trait number 11 is the ability and willingness to set boundaries with other people, which can feel uncomfortable if you've never done it before. It might make you feel like you're being selfish, and so you might want to shy away from it. And as a result, instead of achieving your fitness goals, sometimes you prioritize people pleasing and you hold yourself back. The problem with that is that it can create resentment in you towards other people, which sours your relationship, which I'm sure you don't want to happen. And it does hold you back from achieving your fitness goals. So it's a lose-lose, whichever way you look at it. Whereas setting boundaries isn't actually selfish, because by setting boundaries, you're looking after yourself and you're making sure that whatever happens, you're going to be able to achieve your goals. As a result, you're going to be thriving because hopefully your goals are health promoting. So the idea is that you're going to feel better because you're engaging in these behaviors. When you feel better, you can show up better for the people who matter to you. So now you're not being selfish, you're actually giving yourself the opportunity to show up better for the people that you care about. You cannot take care of anybody else if you are not looked after first. Trait number 12, which is closely related to setting boundaries, is the ability to manage your social meals depending on your current priority. And for that, you do need the ability to set boundaries. For instance, if you are in a fat loss phase, my most successful clients don't have a social meal more than once a week, maximum twice per week. They might go out to social events more than once or twice, but they typically don't eat or drink at all of these other events. They just choose one or two that really matter to them. And this enables them to be consistent enough with their calorie deficit to see the progress that they want to see. On the other hand, if you choose your priority to be maintenance at this moment in time, or a calorie surplus even, then you can be a little bit more flexible, but you're still going to have to manage your social meals, because if you go out 4, 5, 6 days per week, you drink and you eat, it's so easy to do both in excess. And even when you're in a calorie surplus, you still want to prioritize health promoting food, which you're not going to do if you're following this YOLO type lifestyle. So once again, circling back to a point I made at the beginning of this episode, you need to be clear about your priorities at all times. If you want to be the kind of person who looks after their fitness and their health, realistically, you are not the norm. The average person engages in excessive behaviors around food and drinks all the time, but the average person isn't in shape. If you want to be in shape, if you want to be healthy, then you're going to have to be able to manage your social meals effectively. Trait number 13 is also about food quality, and it's the ability to avoid playing macro Tetris, which is a colloquial term I use to refer to when somebody first discovers the if it fits your macros approach and takes it to an extreme where, because you have a calorie target and you know that if you stay within your calories, you're going to be able to control your body composition, then you try to fit as many highly palatable foods like pizza and cookies and so on into these calories as you can, instead of prioritizing health promoting food that makes you feel good and fuel training. Now, I appreciate that if you come from a restrictive background with food, like me, where for a long time you had a long list of forbidden foods, the if it fits your macros approach feels liberating, and you just want to have all of these foods that you haven't allowed yourself for who knows how many years. However, you then need to upgrade to a more mature approach to where now, yes, you can still have your cookies and your pizza, but you want to prioritize these health promoting foods, because not only do they make you feel good and fuel training, they also help you develop a better relationship with food than you would have if you only focused on hitting your calories and eating as many Mars bars within those calories as you possibly can. It's also going to better support your digestive health, and if one of your goals is fat loss, it's going to make dieting a lot easier and more successful, because now you're more satiated, and you also thrive because your body is full of nutrients even on a lower calorie diet. And if your goal is to build muscle at maintenance or in a surplus, then you're going to put all those nutrients in service of muscle growth and recovery from training, and you're truly gonna feel like you're living your best life because you have a large calorie budget, because you're not in a deficit, and you are also filling up those calories with beneficial nutrients. So these are the 13 key traits that I've identified among my most successful clients. I'm sure there are others, and if I thought about this episode for another week, I would probably come up with many more. However, I also didn't want to turn this into a 3-hour podcast. I wanted to come up with a few key components of a successful fitness journey to share with you today, so that, as I've said, if you don't already have these traits right now, you know which ones you need to work on. And that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you as always for listening. If you want to connect with me, or better yet, if you want me as your coach, it would be great if you use the link in the show notes to visit my website, where you can read more about my service and where you can apply for it, so that I can get in touch with you within 72 hours to book your complimentary consultation with me via video or phone call. For now, I thank you again for your attention, and I will talk to you next time with episode 100. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.